so good to see you again. How are you?
Hey, Shawn, great to see you. How have you been? How's quarantine treating you?
It's been a little difficult, but also it's created a lot of creativity for me. So trying to get some videos and things together. What have you been up to?
Yeah, same. More videos, more classes. This is a chaotic situation, but that also it gives us reason for creativity to change things up.
Absolutely. The one thing I will say is that I am a subscriber of your channel, and I've noticed an influx of videos from you recently. So that's really nice. Anybody who's not subscribed, I hope that they actually do, because it's pretty good information. So.
Oh, thanks, Shawn. I appreciate it. Well, I guess I have more free time than usual. And with all the LSAT Flex changes, there's more reason to create more information for everyone out there navigating this new time.
Definitely. I know that our law school for Texas Tech, or myself personally, I'm going to be trying to upload more videos to sort of explain the process for admissions and all of those great things. So kind of have to stay tuned for those and see how those come out.
Awesome. Well, I think it's great that you're doing that and helping to support applicants in this time when you can't do the normal in-person recruiting events.
Absolutely. Do we have a few that are logged in now, or?
Yeah. It looks like we got quite a few people in here already. So might as well jump in.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Shawn Adams. I work at Texas Tech University School of Law. I'm the Assistant Director for Recruitment, and I'm the person that goes out and recruits all of you fantastic future lawyers. And I am so thankful that Steve Schwartz has agreed to host this event tonight. Steve, can you tell them about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me, Shawn. It's great to connect with you again. So for folks who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I've seen a couple of changes over the years, but nothing nearly as big as what we're seeing now with the new online LSAT Flex. I never thought I would see it in my lifetime potentially, but here we are. So lots of changes to navigate and figure out, but I'm glad to connect with everyone and discuss them all with you, Shawn.
Absolutely. Let's just jump right into that, because I know there's a lot to cover. Can you talk about the difference between the paper LSAT, which was the original LSAT, and the digital, which has just sort of recently happened?
Yeah, sure. So last year, for reasons unrelated to coronavirus, of course, LSAC finally moved the LSAT from paper to a digital format, and they kind of jumped over the computer altogether and went straight to a tablet format for the digital LSAT. But that was still in person. The content was identical. The only thing that changed is that they removed the writing sample from being in person and handwritten to being separate and online and typed from home, which I imagine was nice for you, Shawn, so that you could actually read what everybody wrote.
It was kind of nice being able to review files now that were legible, and they included spell check, which was fantastic. So
Yeah.
it fixed everything. We still have a lot of comma issues, but yes, that was a really nice perk. Can you talk a little bit about the written part of the LSAT, and we'll go back to the other LSAT part, but I know that that has been sort of an unusual component.
Yeah. So the writing sample is interesting because writing is so important for law school and so important for being an attorney, but the writing sample is unscored, I think mainly for logistical reasons, because it would be a lot of work to score that. And there's some questions about how one would do that. And so the writing sample is unscored as it's always been. But now that it's typed, I would imagine that folks like you might take it a little bit more seriously because you can read it, you're more likely to look at it. And their brains aren't fried after doing 5 LSAT scored sections. They're doing it later from home, so they can do it when they're fresh.
And when they adapted the writing portion that's now digital or from home, they kind of had to use some new software and some new, I believe you have to have a camera to record you, so they're making sure that you're the one that's doing it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually quite similar to what they're doing for the LSAT Flex, which is it's online, it's from home, it's from your own computer. And for security, they are watching you with a webcam and a mic. For security, they're recording it for later potential review in the case of a security issue. But it's funny, nobody ever asked me, what about cheating on the writing sample? Because it's unscored, the stakes are not perceived as being quite as high. With that Flex, which we'll get into, of course, it's the same security, but people take it more seriously. And so I get the questions about cheating on that. But writing sample, I wouldn't stress too much about it overall, but I would give it a little bit more effort and more attention than previous, given that it's being looked at more.
Yes, it does give you that period of time to kind of show us your thinking and your logic, your logical reasoning, and how you would formulate sort of your thoughts on something. I guess the cheating aspect would come in if you had somebody who's not a strong writer who said, "Hey, get my friend in here. They can type this up really quickly, and it'll look great on my behalf." But what I loved about it is, you're right, they started that, I believe, last year or sometime around last year. And so that gave them the up on creating the LSAT Flex, correct?
Exactly.
Or was there. So
Yeah, I love that they actually, with the digital transition on the tablet, they got the software figured out, they got the format figured out, the writing sample, they got the security figured out, they figured out how to navigate the tech, how to navigate the security, how to partner with companies that could handle that. And so that kind of paved the way, unbeknownst to them at the time, to do the Flex. So they were already halfway there at least.
that's fantastic. So yes, so can you tell us about the Flex test?
Yeah, sure. So the Flex, I never thought I'd see it again. It's remarkable how quickly LSAC has moved. So really kudos to them for bringing it up to speed. The Flex is the new online LSAT as a result of the fact that they cannot administer the LSAT in person due to social distancing and stay-at-home orders and such. It's online from home. The biggest change is that it's only 3 sections, not 5. So huge change in terms of the amount of time. You're done in 2 hours.
How does that work? What 3 sections are there? Is it similar to the former test, or what do they do that's different?
It's pretty similar. So you still have your logic games, your logical reasoning, and reading comprehension. There are no new question types, no new content. It's just the amount has changed. So it's only 1 section of games, 1 reasoning, 1 reading comp, whereas previously it was 2 sections of logical reasoning, as well as an unscored experimental section of any of the 3 types.
Okay, so they no longer have the experimental section. Didn't they use that to create new LSATs for the future?
They do. And so that's a problem in a way that they can't do that anymore. People ask me what's going to happen for the future. And I'd say, well, I don't see any reason to go back to in person if they figured out the online, but that remains an open question. How would they test out the future questions if they can't administer them to the general population of test takers?
And they've sold previous LSATs as like practice exams, correct? So it's not like you go back to the old ones and just kind of dig out some from the past. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, so over the years, since 1991 up to nearly the present day, they were administering 4 LSATs a year. 3 of them were released and sold and available for future test takers to use for studying. They would keep 1 in the bank in reserve for cases where they would administer it overseas, for example, or for Sabbath observers, or in the case of inclement weather. And if COVID-19 had only existed for 1 month, they could have used one of those for that administration.
Right.
If they could have done it in person. For some reason, if they needed a unique situation like that, they could use the old form. But long term, that's a problem. They've only got so many in the bank. They've got to keep administering new exams, and they've got to keep creating new exams because they don't want people to run into the same questions multiple times.
Okay. So do you think that they're just going to stick with Flex from now on, or are they going to offer maybe 3 different options, or can you take the paper anymore now that they have digital? Like, what sort of is the future for the LSAT?
I'd be lying if I said I knew. I'd be playing the stock market. Yeah. But I would say that, again, if they could do it indefinitely in online, I think they would, just because of all the logistical things that resolves, like booking testing centers, hiring proctors, having enough test centers available. Sometimes test centers are booked up and folks have to travel long distances or just pull their hair out trying to book a time. And this removes all of that. It's the ultimate flexibility, no pun intended. Like, that really actually works out a lot of issues, but the experimental section still remains open to question how they would handle that. LSAC says they would like to do it in person in the future. Going forward, if they could, they've even talked about administering it in smaller groups with social distancing in order. They keep talking about that, but I've noticed them soften their language over time about doing it in person going forward. So we'll see what happens. Of course, May and June are LSAT Flex. July is an open question, but I'd say it's pretty likely to be Flex. They'll have to figure out some things, but I do think that long-term Flex will remain. That's just my personal guess, though.
Okay. I mean, that sounds kind of fantastic for the students who aren't able to travel to all the different testing centers. Are they able to kind of take it at different times, or is there a set time where you have to go and be there, and this is like when you're taking the test?
So they actually have a lot of flexibility. Again, it's kind of cool. With doing it online, they made it so that you can book anytime throughout the day from 9 a.m. Eastern until 7 p.m. Eastern. So that's a pretty wide range. If you're a morning person, you've got that. If you're an evening person, you can do that. You could do throughout the day. And then those are in 20-minute increments. So you could book 9:20 a.m. or you could book 1:20 p.m. or anything between that range of 9 to 7 Eastern time, which is great. And they've got proctors available remotely to monitor at any time within that range. As for the question of paper, that's only available outside North America, and it still is actually available outside North America. There's still the question about whether they'll administer it as a flex for those folks if their June LSAT is canceled internationally, which is scheduled for late June. I think it will be. I think they'll make it a flex because people all over the world have internet. That is an option. And then in rare cases in North America for accommodated test takers, they sometimes have the paper version, but pretty much everyone in North America is doing either digital tablet if COVID permits or online.
Okay. We kind of touched on this briefly a little bit ago, talking about cheating on the LSAT. If we're going into this digital flex format where there's going to be cameras that are sort of watching you, and you talked about proctoring. How does that all work?
Yeah, so they basically, like they did with the writing sample last year, they made it so that they're watching you from home, at your home with a webcam and mic. So they make you scan the room beforehand with the camera to make sure there's nobody else in the room, no testing security issues, like you don't have anything on your desk that you shouldn't. And they have that on you for the entire time. So the LSAT Flex, 3 35-minute sections, back to back, no break, about 2 hours. The whole time, you cannot leave the view of the camera. You can't have anybody else entering the room. You're allowed to have your pets though, but you've got to stay in the field of view of the camera. And that's it. So you can't leave. You can't have books or other papers other than the scratch paper on your desk available to you. So I don't really see a massive issue with security. They also make sure that you close out all your programs. They have the ability to kind of screen share on your end so they can see everything you've got on your screen at the moment. And I don't even see how you would cheat anyway, because having books wouldn't really help you that much. Even if you did have a book in front of you, the test is so severely time constrained that are you going to go look something up? What would you look up? There's nothing to memorize here. It's really a test of reasoning, and you don't know which questions are going to be on the exam, so you can't reason through them in advance.
Right.
I don't see it as being a huge issue, although I get why people would want to cheat if they could, given the importance of the LSAT.
So they just need a big open area that has nothing around them, where they can kind of just take off the camera, show around the room, make sure there's nobody else in there to take the exam. That's pretty cool. This is a very tough question, and it's okay if you don't have the answer to it, but it is a concern for some people. I know that there are some students or some prospective students out there who may not have a webcam, who may not have the equipment that they would need. Are there any types of accommodations for those types of students?
Yeah, there are, of course. Not everybody has a suitable device for this. Some people have no computer. Some people use their smartphones or tablets, or their computer might not be up to date enough or be able to run the software. And so, yeah, LSAC is going to help those folks out. Just reach out to them if you're affected, and they'll provide you with a loaner device or connect you with a local university or law school where you might be able to take it. And at least that way you'll be set. And the other thing is, of course, it's the internet connection. Same deal. If your internet's shaky and unreliable, then I wouldn't count on it, because if it lags or breaks up too much, that could invalidate the exam, and that would be enormously stressful. So again, reach out to LSAC and they'll hook you up. They'll provide you with what you need so you'll be able to do it.
What about other accommodations? I know that there are some students who maybe need extra time, or for whatever the reason. Are they still doing those types of things with this Flex LSAT?
Yeah, they are. So whatever accommodations you were approved for the regular in-person LSAT, you will have those same accommodations for LSAT Flex. And if it's extra time, that's a very easy adjustment to do online with LSAT Flex with the same software. Very little would change because they just have to adjust the timer. Okay. But for other things, like other accessibility issues, if the software itself doesn't provide it, like line spacing or text size, something else altogether, then you might need to go take it at a college or law school in person where they can give you the appropriate proctoring.
Okay. That's fantastic that they've kind of worked all of those things out. You did say that now the Flex is a condensed version. So is the timing the same? I mean, is it just a shorter exam? And how is that scored differently?
That's the big question. Yeah. So it's condensed in that you're doing fewer questions, fewer sections, but it's still the same types of sections. So you would have about 25 questions on logical reasoning for about 35 minutes. That doesn't change. You're just doing fewer questions overall. And the reason is actually simple. It's bathroom breaks. If you were to leave the room for a bathroom break, that might be a test security issue. It complicates things a little bit. They wanted to remove that. Also, ProctorU isn't set up. ProctorU, by the way, is the company that's providing the security. They're not set up for longer exams. They need the exam to be shorter. And they've had to shorten other exams too, like the advanced placement exams for high school kids. They had to shorten those too, just to make it work for ProctorU. But anyway, it's the questions are all weighted equally, which means that all sections are approximately equal. And that's different. The regular LSAT was 4 scored sections, 2 logical reasonings, making it about half the exam. Now logical reasoning's only about 1/3 of the exam. So its importance has diminished, and the importance of logic games and logical and reading comprehension has increased in comparison. So that's actually a pretty significant change.
That is very cool. So with all these changes, with everything that's happened, how should you study for the LSAT?
Yeah, well, the biggest change would be what I just said, which is that you might want to spend less time on logical reasoning for your studying since it's a smaller part of the exam. And you might want to spend more time on games and reading comp, relatively speaking.
Okay.
But because the content of the question types is really the same, not that much else would have to change, actually.
Which is kind of nice. It's, you know, for people like me, I hated the logic games. I'm not going to lie. That was the absolute worst part of the exam. And I know some people love them, and those people are freaks. If you're one of them, I apologize. But I'm just not that type of person. But there are different techniques that you can do for learning logic games. There's different things that you can learn on, because the exam really is accuracy and speed. And the speed is what kills you, because I think if you had all day, we'd all have really high scores on the LSAT. But are there tips that you can kind of give, or you know, resources that you can point students to that can help them develop that speed and the accuracy?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you, speed and accuracy are the two sides of this exam. Accuracy first, then speed comes with time. And yes, I've got plenty of resources, of course, on the LSAT blog, the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel, the podcast, the Facebook group, Instagram. I'm putting out tons of information all the time. And then, of course, there's much more in my courses as well, where I go into more depth on all of that. But where the biggest thing I would say is, for the Flex specifically, you want to think about, as you said, accuracy and speed. There's fewer questions, so each question is worth more, which means the second the exam starts, you want to be ready to go, which means you might want to do some warm-up questions beforehand. And I've always recommended this, even for the in-person exam, but it's even more important for the Flex. Endurance matters less, and accuracy and being ready to go matters much more.
Okay, so I did not hear that before. Like, I should be doing a couple of tests, maybe in the parking lot before, or not tests, but a couple of questions in the parking lot to kind of gear myself up and get ready for the exam that's coming up?
Yeah, so for an in-person exam, you'll be in the parking lot, and for the Flex, you'll be home. But just the same, like before you load up ProctorU, before you log in, before you're ready to go, do those questions, and then obviously put them aside, put them back on the shelf or wherever they are, so that's not a security issue. But you do want to have done something immediately before, and that's also nice because in person, you're in the parking lot. You then go in, you wait around a bit. They call your name, you fill in the bubble sheets for the Scantron, for the old paper LSAT, for the in-person one, even for the digital, they're still reading instructions. There might be 20, 30 minutes before you actually start. Now you do your questions, you put them away, then you hit start on your screen and you're in.
That's fantastic. So I'm trying to think, how can you simulate sort of the Flex or the digital, or is there a way to do that at home?
There is actually. In LSAC, they've got a program called Law Hub, also known as Official LSAT Prep Plus, where they put over 60 exams in the digital LSAT format, which is the same exact format you have for the Flex. The difference being 3 sections for Flex, not 4 scored sections for the digital. And so just skip one of the logical reasoning sections, and you've got a pretty similar exam that's comparable. I get a lot of questions regarding the score conversions, the scoring scale, because LSAC has not released scoring scales for the LSAT Flex, only for the digital LSAT. And so somebody sent me this calculator where you could actually put in your results, and it'll give you a rough approximation based on your overall accuracy.
Oh, that's great.
So
Is that something you can find online?
yeah, I'll put that link in the chat just so that everybody can have access to it, because it's pretty useful. And I get this question so much, and I wish LSAC would give guidance on it, but I think that just for their end, for their statistics and everything, they didn't want to release that because maybe it's too complicated. And they're very big on precision. And if they can't be precise enough, they'd rather just give no answer. But I know everybody has this question. And so just to give you a rough estimation, I think could be useful to get a sense of where do you stand. So I've put that in the chat and folks can use that to get a rough idea.
So for any of the people that are watching who are really unfamiliar with the LSAT, they're kind of just jumping into this, how would you recommend that they get started? Should they start with a timed test? Should they not time themselves the first, should they go through an entire exam at the very beginning, or should they start studying individual pieces? What are your recommendations there?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on this, and I'm actually in the minority on this one. I am actually against taking cold diagnostics because the LSAT's like a foreign language. Typically, you're not going to score that close to your potential, and it can be discouraging. So I say, if you're learning a foreign language, give yourself a chance to learn the language first before you try to read a book in that language and then beat yourself up for not doing that great. So that's my perspective on it, but I could see the usefulness in that it gives you a benchmark from which to later measure your progress. Because you can see I went up.
Yes, I can see it from both sides. I think the jumping off without really knowing what any of it looks like kind of gives you an idea of what to expect, because I know a lot of students go into this thinking, I did well on my SATs, I did well on ACTs, or well in college. I didn't really have to study that hard. I'm going to ace the LSAT. It's not a big deal. And they don't understand that it really is learning a new language. And it's hard to explain that without actually showing you what we mean by that. And so going through an exam, even if I like to tell students, take an exam, but don't worry about your first score. Don't let that freak you out or anything else. Very few people actually do really well on their first exam, just trying it out. But it gives you an idea of how difficult it's going to be and how much time you need to put into doing it. One of the things for me, again, I hated the logic games. So one of the pieces of advice that I give to students that are similar to me, I say, do one logic game, just one set of criteria and one set of questions. And if it takes you an hour to map it out, to diagram it, to understand it forwards and backwards, inside and out, that's fine. And then the next time that you do one that looks similar, it'll take you 30 minutes and then 15. And then you'll get down to the time that you need for the exam, rather than freaking yourself out, getting frustrated, throwing your pencil and saying, I quit.
I like that a lot. Yeah, reducing the time little by little.
Yes.
The diagnostics, if they emphasize the importance of the exam to you and how much work you have to do going forward, that's fine. That's certainly a benefit. And if you've already studied a bit and you're retaking, then a diagnostic could be great to help you find your weak areas too. If you already have a rough sense of what's involved and you want to dive deeper to shore up your foundation, that could be a really good way to do it too.
Definitely. That kind of brings me to timing. This is a big one. Law schools begin accepting applications, and I'm talking generally law schools, not the ones that have 3 start times. I'm talking the ones that start in the fall. We begin accepting applications in September, the year before the year that you want to go. So we've been accepting applications for this coming fall since last September. So it's important to understand the timelines for when you should take the LSAT. It's important to understand whether or not you are going to take the LSAT more than once, or if you're one and done, because I think that affects your timeline for studying. Am I wrong?
No, it matters a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah. I believe that if you are looking to apply this September and you have not taken any LSAT before, you really should be into it now. This is May, classes are done. Even if you're working, hopefully it's kind of slowed down, especially with what's going on in the world. You should have a little bit more time at home. This is a great time to kind of buckle down, but how long would you suggest spending, say, per day on studying for the LSAT?
I would say if you've got all the time in the world, if your schedule is wide open, then 5 to 6 hours in a day could be fine. I wouldn't do more than that because you run the risk of burnout. Yes. I had somebody ask me, should I do 8 hours a day for 60 days straight? And I said, absolutely not. Recipe for burnout. Yeah. Slow and steady here. This is a grueling exam. It's difficult. It takes time. It takes a lot out of you. So maybe 2 to 3 hours in the morning, 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon, and you're done. And you've got plenty of time for self-care and any other obligations you have. And if you're busy, then if you have work or if you have school, even under stay-at-home orders and such, or if you have to go out and about, that's fine too. Then just do one study chunk of 2 to 3 hours and save the rest of the time for whatever else you have to do.
And it's important in education. I was a former teacher, so having those breaks in between what you've just learned to really let your brain kind of soak it in and to be able to retain that information. Doing large chunks at a time, you lose a lot of what you're trying to retain. Is that something that you kind of preach?
Yeah, I would agree. Taking breaks is important. Even within the 2 to 3 hours, you could take breaks and have them scheduled. There's a great technique called the Pomodoro technique. And there's an app called the Focus app that actually executes this on your phone, and it's free. Look it up, the Focus app, and basically has these periods of 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of break, where you could check email, social media, get up, walk around, then get back into it. So you always know you have a break coming up, but you can't take it yet. So you're still at the books.
That is a perfect method. It really is refreshing to have those little breaks, and you don't feel like you're working quite as hard, which is weird, but you actually are retaining more doing that. That's a fantastic way to go about that. How would you set up a study plan for, say, the Flex right now?
Absolutely. And so this is really what I had in mind with regard to the topic for tonight a little bit, which was that a lot of folks don't know if they're going to be doing Flex or the digital tablet or overseas. They might be doing in person on paper. And the content of the exam has not changed. We've seen lots of changes over the years that have involved content changes, like dual comparative reading comp passages in 2007. We had rule substitution questions added in exam 57, which was in 2009. And so we've seen little changes here and there, little tweaks, but the content has largely remained the same. It still remains the same. So if you're doing Flex in May, about a week from now, or you're doing the June Flex or July, you don't even know what it's going to be, the content will remain the same. So we have these stages. You talked about accuracy and speed, Shawn, and that's absolutely right. It's accuracy followed by speed. So untimed work followed by timed work.
Okay.
So that's how I would simply break it up. In more depth, though, there's what I call the LASER approach to studying. And LASER is an acronym standing for learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. So learning is theory, accuracy is individual questions by type, S is timed sections, E is full-length exams, R is review. All that changes. Yeah, LASER. As an educator, yeah, maybe you could appreciate that. So LASER is the acronym for that. E is for exams. That's the part that I would tweak, because Flex is 3 sections, in person, digital or paper is 5 sections. So for Flex, if you know you're doing Flex in a week from now or in June, do 3 section exams. If it's an open question, do some 3 sections, others 5 sections to simulate. And the nice thing is the in-person is 3 sections followed by a break, then 2 more. So your results from the first 3 sections are your Flex score. You continue on after the break, that's your in-person score with 5 sections. That's all that has to change, really, other than simulating the test itself, like doing the format of computer versus tablet or paper.
That's great. I know that for our law school specifically, for Texas Tech School of Law, and I know that there are many others across the country, if you take the LSAT more than once, we are going to take your top score, but we can see all of the other scores. We can also see if you canceled your score, so you took the exam and you canceled the score, or if you were absent on the day of the test. Now that's different than if you signed up for the test and then you changed the date or something like that. If you let them know ahead of time that you weren't coming, but if you don't show up on the day of your exam and you were scheduled to be there and didn't tell anybody that you weren't coming, then that will show up as an absent. So we can see all of those. We can see how many times you've taken them. Again, we're going to take your top score. So we can see if you're actually going up, if you're improving, which is fantastic. We can see if you kind of plateaued and kind of found your wheelhouse, or if you've actually declined. But there are a lot of other schools out there. I know UT, I know A&M, and I know several others outside of the US do average your scores. So it's important to note that. So if you are going to take the test multiple times, it's great if you could just do a one and done, right? How many practice exams do you think somebody should take roundabout? I know I love the lawyer answer, it depends on the person, but how many do you think is adequate to know where you might score around on the actual exam?
I would say that 5 is the minimum I would recommend. I would say that's adequate. And I would actually say 10 for before test day itself. And obviously, if your test is in a week, you don't do all 10 in a week if you haven't done any so far. But 10 would be ideal. And if you're taking it in June, you could do about 2 per week between now and then, especially with Flex, 3-section exams. It's easier to do 3-section exams than it is to do 5-section exams. So you could theoretically do more 3-section exams, but ideally 10. And that's interesting that you say a couple of Texas schools average, because the vast majority of schools, my understanding is that they do not average, the vast majority in general in the US.
And the report that we are sent from the LSAC does have the average score along with all of your scores. So it will show your top and then it will show your average. So depending on the school, it's just one of those policies you should know when you're applying to law school. There's a lot of different policies. You're going to have to do different things for personal statements for different schools, letters of recommendation, all of the different parts of the admissions process. But as far as the LSAT is concerned, know the policy of the schools that you're applying to. So very important. And the LSAC kind of did an odd thing in the last few years. They had a limit on how many times you could take the LSAT, and then they removed that limit, and then they placed the limit back. So anybody that was caught in that weird time period, I don't know how they're dealing with that. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, so I mean, they basically said that the new limits that were implemented last year in July and September 2019, they were not retroactive.
Okay.
So any number of times you took it before didn't matter. It's only going forward. So very few people should actually be affected by that who are with us live right now.
That's good.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Shawn, if there's 2 things you could confirm for myself and everyone watching right now. One is, in general, could you just confirm my understanding that the vast majority of schools in the US do not average multiple scores? You mentioned, because you mentioned a couple in Texas.
I think there are many that don't. I think that there are some that do. So I only know of those 2 specifically that do. And I know that we don't. So we're not going to average your score. We're going to take your top one. Another thing that we don't have is for our early decision. If you apply between September 1st and November 1st, there's that period of early decision. Ours is not a binding application. So there are some law schools where if you apply for early decision and you get in, you're contractually obligated to go to that school, and you have to withdraw from all the other schools. For ours, we hope that you're going to come to our law school, but we're not going to force you to. So it's one of those things. There's good things though either way. If it's one of those top schools that you really want to go to and you get in for early decision, go there. That's fantastic. Hopefully you get great scholarships. But yes, so.
Well, it's nice that you allow that flexibility, though.
Yes.
So my other question for you is I've gotten this question a lot from folks, a lot of confusion around it. How do you view the results of LSAT Flex relative to the regular in-person 5-section exam?
I think we're going to be reviewing it pretty much the same way. I will tell you that everybody's going to be in the same boat. So you're not going to be looked down on if you took the, sort of 3-section test versus the 5-section test. We all understand, we're all humans. Everybody on the admissions committee for our law school, and I'm sure across the country, we're humans. We understand that there are things that happen that are out of everybody's control, like COVID-19. So we're going to understand, we're going to look at those dates. If you took the LSAT prior to, and that was your higher score, then that's not affected by COVID-19. But if you've taken the Flex now, it's absolutely, we're going to understand that that was the exam that you were able to take. Now going forward, I don't think that's going to change. We rely on the LSAC to have a comparable exam. Who knows what will happen in the future if they get the scores back from a couple of tests and there's some anomalies, then we'll deal with that as it comes. Nobody has that crystal ball. I can't tell the future. But right now I can tell you we're going to view those the same as any other score. So
that's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, the folks at LSAC, the ones who create this exam, they are obsessive about the data. They are extremely precise about it. They have very detailed reports that even I have difficulty understanding, navigating through all the language of psychometrics, but I don't believe they would do this exam if they didn't think it would work well, if they didn't think the results would be comparable.
No, I don't think that they would either. So this is great for the students. I mean, I think that it's an advantage to be able to take it now. If you're prepared, don't take the exam if you're not prepared. If you haven't studied enough, if you're scoring in the 120s and 130s, I don't recommend you taking the exam, because there's not a law school out there that I know of that is going to accept somebody with those scores. And that's a good thing. I kind of want to briefly touch on this because I know it hurts people's feelings when they don't get into to schools based on like poor LSAT, performance. The one thing that I like to drive home is every single point on the LSAT really matters because it's a 61 point spread, right?
Yeah.
Between a 120 and a 180. So every bit of that really, really counts. So if you're 5 points above, you could be looking at amazing scholarships. If you're above the medians of the schools that you're applying to. If you're 5 points below, that may be difficult to get in, or you may get waitlisted, like depending on, the applicant pool that year. If you're 10 points below, it is very difficult to overcome that. So those medians are there for a reason. But this is why I'm telling you that it's important to get those LSAT scores. You deal with data all the time, so you understand that we understand from those scores who's going to do well and who is not. And you don't want to go to law school and incur so much debt, especially if you have a low LSAT score and you get into a law school, chances are you're not getting a good scholarship, if any scholarship money. We don't want you to go through the program, spend a lot of money, not come out with a degree, we want you to succeed. So that's why people like Steve, who's amazing, and there's other programs out there, do whatever it takes to get those great law school or LSAT scores, but work hard at doing that so that you can prove that you're ready for the rigor that is law school. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you raised that point, Shawn, because I actually get a lot of criticism for saying that exact thing, the idea that your LSAT score actually, it's there for a reason. It actually is somewhat predictive of first-year law school grades, bar passage rates and such, less so to how you'll be as an attorney. And of course, there are exceptions. There are people with low scores who pass the bar on the first try. There are people with low scores who do very well in law school. But on average, it's a great determinant overall. And a higher LSAT score, aside from predictive value, it can unlock scholarship money. It can unlock getting into better schools. I'm sure that to some extent, your hands are tied in terms of giving out money, unless they've got the score above the medians, or at the medians at least.
Those medians for scholarships, the medians are incredibly important. So you need to have the good grades, you need to have the good LSAT score. The thing with the GPA is typically by the time that you are beginning this process and applying to law school, you're towards the end of your college career. So hopefully you've kept your grades up the entire time. By the time that you graduate, your GPA is set. You can't change your undergraduate GPA. Some people go and get a master's later on. Let's say that they did not do so hot in undergrad, and they go back later on, maybe get a master's degree, really prove that they are academically, successful. Those are great, but we still go by the undergraduate GPA. So, to get good scholarships, you need to be above the GPA, or the GPA and the LSAT median. The great thing about the LSAT is you can learn how to do it. You can crack the LSAT. And so that's an important thing to know. If you're not hitting those scores, if you're still below, even if you have to postpone for a year and really just put some time and effort into studying, that could mean thousands and thousands of dollars in scholarship. So if I can go to law school, you can go to law school. Let me tell you that. I am not a genius on any level, but I did get into law school. I successfully completed law school. I am barred in the state of, in Washington, D.C. So, you can definitely do it, but it's going to take a lot of work. So I kind of went on a rant there.
No, I couldn't agree more. I'm just dumbstruck by the fact that I couldn't have said that better myself. I love what you said there. I couldn't agree more.
Now, one of the questions that we've been getting quite a bit regarding grades is there has been a change to a lot of the grading systems due to COVID-19. For this spring, a lot of the universities throughout the entire United States, including Texas Tech, moved to either a different type of grading system. So Texas Tech specifically went to credit, no credit, or you could keep your grade. So they're allowing you to see what your grades are. And if you like it, you can keep the grade, the letter grade. And if you passed, but you didn't like your grade, you can get credit. If you did not pass, then that's going to be a no credit. a no credit. So the LSAC has on their website, you can Google, let's see, what did I Google over here? Something about the LSAC transcript notation and then COVID-19. Like if you put all those words in, you're going to come up with the LSAC webpage for this. They discuss how those notations will be placed onto your transcript. And they're also going to include a letter with all of the applications that come through that were affected by the COVID-19 if they have those grading differences. We're going to receive a letter in your file that says this student was affected by COVID-19. This has a few different things. If it's a no credit class, that will count as an F. So that will hit your GPA. If it's counted as a credit, it will not affect your GPA. So it won't go higher, it won't go lower. So anybody who's trying to raise their GPA, if it's a pass, fail, or a credit, no credit class, those will not affect the GPA. It will just show that you passed the class. So people are asking us, how are you going to look at those classes? You know, how does that affect us? Because believe it or not, I look at every single class on your transcript and I see how you did. So of course, again, we're human. So we're going to be looking at those holistically and we're going to say, hey, they passed their classes. If you passed, that's great. If you have a letter grade, that's great. Hopefully it made you go up a little bit. But if your GPA stayed the same, we understand this was kind of a weird transition period. If you did get an F though, that is it's gonna show as a fail. So just letting you know how that kind of affects you.
That's a big question. I'm glad you walked everyone through that. One question I have for you as a follow-up, and you may or may not have the answer to this because it's too early, but the summer. What about summer classes that are starting within the next month?
I believe most of the schools are probably going to stick with the same thing. Again, this is going to vary by school. So you may have a university that's sticking with their letter grades no matter what. But I think even in the summer classes, I think they're still going to be doing pass, fail, credit, no credit, something like that. So it's just something to keep in mind. You know, if anybody was hoping, if they were on the cusp of having like a good GPA, but could have gone the bad GPA route, you know, having a pass fail class or a credit no credit class may not affect your GPA at all, or it could go down again if you don't pass the class. So just kind of keeping those things in mind. But I think they're going to continue those over the summer as well. Some people might even be continuing it into the fall. Just depends on whether the classes are going to be in person or not. You know.
Of course, that is a big open question.
It's so tough right now. It's difficult to know what's going to happen, but you know, we're all doing our best.
Of course. And if you don't mind, I'm sure you get this question every single day. Where's Texas Tech at on classes for the fall?
So right now, they're planning on having in-person classes. That is what our president of our university, President Skobanek, has gone on and said, that we are planning on having in-person classes. Of course, nobody knows that that is 100% going to happen. If there's a new spike, if there's an increase in COVID-19, you know, they may do hybrid classes. We just don't know what it's going to look like. We'll have to take a look at our classrooms and what we can accommodate as far as spacing. We'll have to, you know, there's people talking about taking temperatures, going in and out of the building. Nobody knows what this is going to look like at all. But for right now, the plan is to be back in the school. You know, so we'll keep people updated. It will be on our website, I promise you. But yeah, we don't know.
Of course. Fingers crossed that it could work.
Fingers crossed. Yes. I would love to see the students back in the school, you know, but safety is everybody's main concern. So if nothing else, we will still continue those face-to-face classes, but, you know, on Zoom or Blackboard or what the other, you know, online options are. It's nice to be able to see each other. By the way, if any of you are still in classes, taking summer classes, and you're doing these types of things, mute yourself. It's very important. There's nothing like having 20 people on a Zoom meeting and somebody's just, yeah.
It only takes one.
This is not on the topic of LSAT at all, and I'm very sorry, but I just want to take this opportunity to remind people, any of you who are communicating with admissions professionals, anybody at all that you communicate with, be sure that you're being professional about it. Be sure that you're sending, you know, greetings, saying your name, ending with, sincerely or best regards or whatever it is that you want to put there. But be polite to everybody because, we're all having a tough time right now. And it's just very important. Oh, wait list. Can I talk about wait list for a moment?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
One of the things you can do with the LSAT, if you are on a wait list, is if you are able to take the LSAT again and your score goes up, always let the schools that you've applied to know that. If your score has gone up and you have a great GPA, we want to know that. Also, be sure to do the letters of continued interest. If you don't send that to a school, we're not going to call you off the wait list because there are other students who did show that interest. So the wait list announcement to you, you get, hey, you're on the wait list, and we ask you to send that letter of continued interest. If you don't do that, we think that you're not interested. So be sure that you do that. If your LSAT goes up, if your GPA goes up, go ahead and let the schools know that. It may be something that kind of puts you ahead of other people on the wait list. We don't have a weighted wait list, so we don't have them numbered or anything like that. We pull for different things that we're looking for. Sometimes we're looking for a higher LSAT, sometimes it's a higher GPA, sometimes we're just looking to fill in, more diversity within the school, different things like that. So you want to be sure you're putting your best foot forward and being polite, and don't call every 2 to 3 days because we won't have an answer for you.
Right. I actually had one follow-up point for you, Shawn, regarding the greetings and closings on communication with law schools.
Yes.
I could certainly see how that would be an issue, and professionalism is important. I'm wondering if you're doing any video calls with applicants, and if so, any best practices to follow there, like not being in pajamas, being in a good environment. Anything you could speak to there?
Absolutely. We do have Zoom meetings that are available for anybody who wants to talk to us. We can give tips on the admissions process. We can answer any of your questions. In the spring, before all the finals were hitting, we actually had some students that were holding Zoom hours as well. So we're not sure what that's going to look like in the future, but we're definitely holding those types of things. Yes, you do not have to wear a suit unless you want to. If you want to suit up, you go ahead, but we're not going to be suited up. So don't worry about that. You do want to be in a somewhat quiet environment. I know that you can Skype or Zoom from your phone. So even if it just means going out and sitting in your car or someplace else, if you've got a lot of family going on in the background or roommates making lots of noise, go ahead and find a quiet place to sit down with us so we can really, speak with complete focus. And be polite. Don't talk over anything that I'm answering. Don't say things like, let's say that you got on a wait list or something like that, and don't call up to complain. Don't say things like, well, this is your loss, or I didn't want to go there anyway, because there may be a change, and maybe in the future you really do want to go here, and you don't want to leave us with that kind of feeling. But yes, professionalism, just be nice. We'll be nice to you. You be nice to us.
Yeah.
Remember that you're looking to join our community, and we take that very seriously. When we're building our community, when we're reviewing files, we're looking for people that we believe are going to be amazing attorneys in the future, but also will be fantastic in our community and really fit in. So Lubbock is a very special place. I'm not from here. I'm from Houston, Texas, which is third largest city in the U.S., something like that.
Wow.
So Lubbock is around 250,000 people. We haven't had the census come back yet, but that was what it was the last time. It might be closer to 300,000 now. Big college town, and just a really nice community to live in. People are very friendly, so that's kind of what we're looking for. So.
Cool. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm wondering of any last questions we could address from the chat, or anything, other topics we should cover before wrapping up.
Are there any questions?
I think we've covered a couple of them already just over the course of our conversation, but we have one more here from Sebastian.
Okay.
Asking about when to start studying for the LSAT and applying to law school while going through the LSAT process.
Yes. So as far as studying for the LSAT, you really need to begin at least a few months ahead of time. I would say 2 to 3 months. Some people start in the summer before they're actually applying. really it's whenever you have the time to really focus on it. I'll let Steve answer that in just a moment, but I will say, as far as your application is concerned, you can have your transcripts sent to everything that you're going to do to apply to law school will happen through your LSAC account. So start an lsac.org account. That's your first thing. Create a username and a password. Have your transcripts sent there. You can have your letters of recommendation sent there. Start writing your personal statements. You can do all of those things, get your resume ready while you're studying for the LSAT. So you can actually apply to the law schools that you want to, and they will just wait until you have an LSAT score. That gets everything else off of your plate, so your entire focus is on the LSAT, and it doesn't waste any of your time where some people are waiting for that score to come back to decide if they're going to do the application. You've lost a lot of time there. So what would you say?
Yeah, sure. No, I think you made all great points as well. I would say at least a few months. Some folks will try to do the LSAT in 2 to 3 months, and you could theoretically do that. But if you want to reach your true full potential, I would say actually closer to 5 to 6 months, which is a long time to devote to this exam, but it's a lot more than most bargain for initially. And so if you want that top score, if you want to reach your fullest potential, it's worth putting in the time. And that means starting a bit earlier than you otherwise might have, but it's what you need to do if you want the top score.
Do you mind if I ask what your top score was, Steve?
Sure. So I ended up getting a 175.
Which is pretty phenomenal. That gets you into any law school in the nation. But was that where you started?
No. I started in the low 150s.
Okay. And how long did it take you to get there?
A year. It took me a very long time. I'm not saying anybody else should spend a full year on this. I certainly wish I hadn't had to. And if I had studied the right way, rather than just doing exam after exam, it might have taken me significantly less time than that.
So, but a 175 and hopefully a good GPA will get you a full scholarship to just about any law school in the country. So definitely worth that year that you invested, and you can show people how to do this, correct?
Correct, I can. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's what I do.
LSAT Unplugged, definitely check that out.
Yes, thank you for that. We had one more. We have to wrap. Actually, I have to wrap up in a few at least. But somebody asked about the name of the website with the digital LSAT practice test, and that is Official LSAT Prep Plus, also known as Law Hub, and it's available inside your LSAC account. Let's see other questions here. We'll just take one or two more before wrapping up. How about, here's one for you, Shawn, about undergrad, coming straight from undergrad versus having work experience first. Which is better, pros and cons?
I don't know that one is better than the other. I think that if you're coming straight from college, you kind of already have that college mentality where you're already knowing you can do your homework, like you've kind of gotten into that groove. I was very non-traditional. I went in my 30s to law school, so I came from teaching. So that was very different for me. I don't think it was strange. I went to Texas Tech School of Law, and there were a lot of people that were older. Most people are younger coming straight out of college, but there were definitely some non-traditional students. So I didn't feel like I was kind of, weird or anything, but I did have to find my groove again for finding, ways to study and all of that I had kind of lost along the way over the years of working. So it just kind of depends on you. I think the right time to go to law school is when you have the financial, the time to do it, like everything has to fall into place, and you have to be 100% focused. You're not going to be working during law school, so you have to have that structure in place to support yourself while you're going. I took out loans. Had I gotten a 175, I would have gotten to go to law school for free. So, just kind of depends on where you are.
Yeah, one idea that comes to mind actually is that the LSAT prep process can be a way for you to get back into the study groove if you've been out of it for a while. So hitting the books, and obviously outlining in law school is different from taking practice tests, but still it's carving out the time, especially given other obligations like family or like work, to see, can you really buckle down and devote the time to this that is necessary? It's taxing.
Yes.
Well, before we wrap up, do you want to just share, Shawn, best way for folks to get in touch with you with follow-ups? I know we weren't able to get to all the questions in the chat, but maybe they can reach out to you or others in the office.
Absolutely. If you want to contact me directly, my email is shawn.adams, which is SHAWN admissions.ttU.edu. And if you want to just generally contact us at admissions, it's admissions.law@ttu.edu. You can also find us on the web. So just Google Texas Tech School of Law, you'll find us. We have an admissions page that has fantastic videos. There's one that has a tour of the law school that we were able to take before all this happened. So lots of great information on there. Please reach out. I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. And folks can also feel free to reach out to me directly, Steve Schwartz over at the LSAT blog, the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. You probably all got an email from me just organizing this event. And so feel free to just hit reply and reach out. I'm happy to help.
Excellent.
Thanks for this, Shawn.
So much, Steve. This was fantastic. We really all appreciate it.
Thanks for a great discussion. I really appreciate it as well. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for the great questions. Stay safe and be in touch. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.